We ask that at this time, if you'll please silence your cell phone, any beeping devices, anything that makes noise. We would appreciate that if you'll silence that at this time. Randy Poe was born in Fayette, Alabama in 1955. He grew up primarily in the South, living in New Orleans, Louisiana, Perdido, Alabama, and Florence. After graduating from Southwest Baptist University in Missouri in 1977, Poe returned to the Shoals area to attend UNA, where he spent 2 years as a commercial music major under the training of Terry Woodford. In 1980, Poe moved to New York, becoming executive director of the Songwriters Hall of Fame in 1982. In 1985, Poe became the president of Leiber and Stoller Music Publishing. Songs in the Leiber and Stoller catalog include Stand By Me, Hound Dog, Jailhouse Rock, On Broadway, Spanish Harlem, Yakety Yak, Love Potion Number 9, Charlie Brown, I Who Have Nothing, Treat Me Nice, Is That All There Is, I'm a Woman, and Kansas City. You guys probably know all those songs. In 1995, Smokey Joe's Cafe, the songs of Leiber and Stoller, opened on Broadway, becoming the first jukebox musical and ultimately the longest-running musical review in Broadway history. As an author, all of Poe's books have focused on music. His first music publishing, A Songwriter's Guide, received the ASCAP Deems Taylor Award. As his other books include Squeeze My Lemon, featuring a foreword by B.B. King, the bestseller SkyDog, the Duane Allman Story, which includes multiple chapters on Allman's session work in Muscle Shoals, and Stalking the Red-Headed Stranger. In 2013, Poe co-wrote Buckham, the autobiography of Buck Owens. Randy has also written numerous magazine and newspaper articles. Several of his articles have focused on Muscle Shoals musicians, including a feature on Pete Carr for Guitar Player magazine and a cover story on Duane Allman for Hittin' the Note magazine. A Grammy-nominated record producer in the Best Historical Album category, Poe has produced dozens of reissues for such labels as Sony, Warner Bros., Atlantic, Rhino, Omnivore, Real Gone Music, Sundays, and K-Tel. In 1993, he produced, compiled, and wrote the line notes for Rhino Records' critically acclaimed CD, The Muscle Shoals Sound, the first U.S. compilation of hits recorded in the Shoals. A guest speaker at music industry workshops and seminars in London, New York, Los Angeles, Nashville, and Memphis, Randy has also lectured at Harvard Law School, New York University, and UCLA, among others. He is a member of the Recording Academy and is a past president of the California Copyright Conference. He has served on the board of directors of the Songwriters Hall of Fame and the Society of Singers, and as an advisory board member of the renowned folk music magazine Sing Out. Currently, he serves as a member of Farm Aid's Development Advisory Council. Poe's professional career began as a disc jockey in North Alabama. In recent years, he has returned to radio with a series of specials for Willie's Roadhouse on Sirius XM. At the age of 69, Randy is the youngest member of the Old Man Dinner Band. Other members are guitarists Petey Andrews and Sam Graham, lead vocalist Harvey Shield, and drummer and Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee Pete Thomas. Now, Randy Poe resides in Los Angeles and Palm Springs with his wife Mina. Their son Riley lives in Santa Monica and is a sports marketing executive. So, without further ado, let's give a warm welcome to Randy Poe.
Anything now.
There's not much left, is there?
No. Where's my roadie?
You want to double this?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not that tall. All right, good enough. Everybody get Niles a round of applause. Good morning. Thank you all for coming. Randy, thank you for being here. It's quite an honor to
My pleasure.
sit down with you and everything. We had lunch the other day, and I might have mentioned to James, I thought I'd made him mad. In just the first few minutes, I asked him a question, and he kind of looked at me with this bewildered look, and then later on he said, you know, you might have asked me the most original question in the last 10 years because when he said he went to New York, I said, why New York?
Well, I was never going to go anyplace else. Los Angeles was too far away. Nashville was country at that time. So New York it had to be.
Had to be. So tell us, kind of got started a little bit with the Pete Carr.
Pete, when I was still living here, I was living with my sister, in fact, of Linda Young Music Studio on North Pine Street. And
if you have any business cards, you can have that.
Yeah. And I saw this article in the want ads for a TAC 4-track machine for sale, and it said, call Pete. So I called the number, he gave me his address, I went over to look at it, he opened the door, and it was like Paul McCartney staring at me. I said, oh, Pete Carr. And so we got to know each other, and before I left, I bought the TAC, but before I left, I mentioned that I would love to write an article about him for Guitar Player magazine, which of course was just pipe dream because I didn't know anybody there and I never had anything published. And he said, sure, let's do it. So I went back to his house, interviewed him, and managed to get Guitar Player magazine to publish the thing, and have been eternally grateful to him ever since, because he was the inspiration that I could possibly write, and so that was it. It was without Pete Carr and one other person, I wouldn't have done any of this.
Pete, for the folks that don't know, I'm sure most people do. Pete Carr was a great guitarist who lived here from Daytona Beach, Florida. One of the lovely things I saw Pete say one time, he said, if it weren't for seeing Travis Womack at the pier in Daytona Beach, I would not have been a guitar player. He ended up in Muscle Shoals with Lenny LeBlanc, with the LeBlanc Carr duo, played on classics like Main Street on Bob Seger and so many records, but one of the greatest guitarists to ever live in Muscle Shoals.
Yeah, he played on Kodachrome, he played on the Tonight's the Night, Rod Stewart, with a great double guitar. He just overdubbed himself, playing harmony lead guitar, which was, something he had done with Duane when they were in the Hourglass together.
Yeah, Pete Carr, one of the greatest guitarists, and what an honor to have a story to kind of get your foot in the door and everything.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. There's another guy sitting, I don't know where he's at now, but he's somewhere around here.
He's right there.
He's right. Point him out. Let's sit next to Dale. So pretty much Pete Carr, but if they weren't for the guy sitting back there, Terry Woodford, there's pretty good chance that you might still be in Fayette working at the radio station in
Carthage, Missouri, working in a poultry plant. There were a number of big jobs throughout my career, but I was a senior at Southwest Baptist University in Bolivar, Missouri, and my mother would always send me newspaper clippings if it had anything to do with the music business in Muscle Shoals. She and my father lived here. She would cut them out and mail them to me, and it was endless. Thanks to Dick Cooper and the other folks who wrote a lot of articles about
Bill Jarnigan.
Yeah, and Bill Jarnigan. So she sent me this article about this. UNA had started this commercial music business course, and I said, "Wow, that's it. That's perfect." So I moved back here and started taking Terry's classes. Now, Terry, you're going to have to remind me. One of them was music publishing. One of them was the record company. One of them was songwriting. What was the fourth one?
Music production, and then you had recording studio techniques.
Yeah, recording studio techniques. But the one that stuck out was the music publishing class, because I said, wait a minute, let me make sure I follow this correctly. You can own copyrights and they can generate income forever. That sounds good. So
they got your attention in a hurry, didn't it?
Yes, it did. So that's the path I chose to ultimately go down. But Terry taught me everything I needed to know. He had a horrible textbook called This Business of Music, which was this thick and made no sense. It was written by two lawyers, one of whom I would later get to know. And I said, if I ever get the chance, I'm going to write a book about music publishing that you could actually understand.
So Terry, I guess it's all up to you that we're sitting here today. Thank
Absolutely.
you for Terry. Everybody, give Terry Woodford a round of applause, please. Segue real quick. Billy Lawson sitting over here. Billy now owns Wishbone Studio, which Clayton and Terry built and everything, and Billy's keeping the Muscle Shoals music alive. So thank you, Billy, for that. So after the college program you were in and everything, you got out, and that's when I guess I asked the question, why New York? You decided you were going to
I had the following things. My girlfriend had broken up with me. I was working at a radio station in Haleyville, and suddenly had the realization that I could be a small market DJ for the rest of my life with this voice, or I could try to do something else with what I had learned from Terry's classes. And so the one other thing was I had a friend from college who had one room in a 3-bedroom apartment that had become available. And so now I suddenly had a place I could actually stay.
I love what you told me the other day. You had like rejection notices taped to the wall.
We got to back up a second. When I first got back to Muscle Shoals in 75, 76, I really wanted to write a book about this place. I didn't realize I was way ahead of my time because it was not yet historical as it is now. And so I interviewed everybody that I could. That was part of the music scene, David Hood and Jimmy Johnson, became real close with Jimmy Johnson. But I interviewed all the cats that were involved at the time, Terry and a whole bunch of other folks. And I started going to publishers, book publishers, trying to get my book about Muscle Shoals, trying to get some interest. And I started getting rejection letters. And at this time, I was at the radio station in Haleyville. And so a pitiful little house with 1 bedroom and a living room, which is where I started taping the rejection letters just across the wall. And I just created wallpaper in the living room with the rejection letters.
But later on, that had to become great inspiration to succeed in what you were kind of set out to do.
If you say so.
You took the jump. You went to New York. Somewhat landed on your feet. You did have someone there that had a room where you could stay, and then spent a lot of time at I think the New York Library, looking at a billboard and other things and looking for jobs while you were there. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was. I had to be able to survive. I had a roommate. That roommate. I sold everything I owned. Got on a Greyhound bus. Moved to New York, and that very roommate. I had like $225 to my name, and when I arrived, he had to borrow some of it because
because that's what roommates do.
That's what roommates do, and of course, I had to pay, the rent, by the way, for the 3-bedroom apartment in Jackson Heights, Queens, was $450 a month, so my third was $150. And
you were kind of slim pickings from the get-go then, right?
So the one talent that I had was I could type fast, really fast. And so as the money began to dwindle quickly, I've learned there were things called temp agencies, and in Manhattan, and so I would go to temp agencies and type for them, and they would say, okay, where would you like to go for the day? We have an opening here for the next 2 days or whatever. And one of those places was Carl Fisher in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and so I went there to work one day and ended up getting hired, which is good because that's where I met my wife, Mina. So that's how long we've been together.
I love the part where you said that you were passing out flyers and got called into the office and thought you were going to get fired, and they're like, what are you doing? And I'm passing out flyers, and they said, well, most people go do it for about an hour or two and throw them in the trash and then sit down there. Where's the way we've had somebody watching you. You're the only person that would like pass out the flyers got in trouble for doing your job.
Yeah, this is when I first moved to New York. Of course, you took anything you could get, and there was a promotion company that needed somebody to pass out flyers, and I said, okay, where do I go? And they said, just go stand in front of the Empire State Building. And I was like, well, at least I know where that is. But yeah, we kind of moved on from there. I quickly got into management. I was watching 2 other people pass out flyers.
But if you put it on your business card or resume, you were the manager, right? Yeah, exactly. So you did that. You met your wife, and then through kind of temp and a couple of events, you end up at the New York Songwriters Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I wrote an article or a commentary for Billboard magazine that somehow, without going into a lot of details, it offended the guy who owned the company I was working for. He thought I was being insulting when I was just trying to be something else. And so he said, perhaps you should go job hunting. So I opened the New York Times one ads, and there was an ad for the executive director of the Songwriters Hall of Fame was looking for an assistant. And like me, Mr. Typist. So I went and met him and showed him my incredible typing skills, and he said, well, I wasn't going to hire a guy. But but he did. And 3 months later, he quit. Now, before we go there, one of the main things that Terry Woodford said was, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I took that to heart. And that's why I was going to the library in New York, the Lincoln Center Library, with all the Billboard magazines, so I could memorize faces and names. And so I got to know all the board members of the Songwriters Hall of Fame during those first 3 months I was there. So when the day came that they were going to have to replace the guy that quit, Sammy Cahn, the great songwriter who wrote over 100 songs for Frank Sinatra, he was the president of the Songwriters Hall of Fame at that time. And I was sitting in my office thinking, well, might as well pack up because they're going to hire a new guy to be the executive director, and he's going to want his own assistant, and it's probably not going to be a guy. And Sammy Cahn, after the board meeting was over, came walking by my office, and I've never forgotten, he just pointed at me and said, Poe, you're it, and walked away. And then Oscar Brand, who was also on the board, walked in and said, hey, they just unanimously elected you to be the executive director of this thing. So that's how I became the executive director of the Songwriters.
3 months in, and you became the executive director of the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
It's not what you know, it's who you know, right?
Right.
What an honor. I mean, we'll go back and forth, but I keep seeing these pictures behind us here.
Yeah.
Chuck Berry.
Yeah, Chuck Berry was inducted, I want to say 82 or 83, 84, somewhere right in there. But yeah, he was a sweetheart. It was one of those things where you hear nothing but nightmare stories about Chuck Berry, and he was the sweetest guy in the world. The whole night, he was great with the press. He was great with his acceptance speech. He was just a wonderful guy.
Kelvin Holly, local guitarist, he said that he carried like a Hawaiian shirt in his guitar case, and he would just kind of shake it off, put it on, and go out on stage, and
Yep, and he got his money before he played the show.
Yeah.
Very wise man.
Yeah, Wayne Chaney said when they were on tour with Little Richard over in Europe that, I want to say, like, soon as you shook hands with Chuck Berry, you had to give him like 3 C notes just to shake hands. And I said, why? And he said, because he's Chuck Berry. Because he can do that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're at the Hall of Fame. So many great songwriters around there and everything. And I'm probably getting out of line and everything, but I know one thing we talked about that I thought was so great, because my little sister's back there. It's one of our favorite soundtracks. Tell us about The Big Chill. The Big Chill soundtrack.
The Big Chill was a movie which had mainly a Motown soundtrack. And the reason it had a Motown soundtrack was because, this is insider music business stuff, Lester Sill ran Joe Bett Music, which is the publishing division of Motown. His son was the music supervisor for the movie The Big Chill, so he helped Dad out and stuffed a bunch of Motown songs in the movie in a couple of hours.
Well, one of my favorite soundtracks, movie soundtracks, I guess, ever, because you just love every song on there, you know.
Yep.
Heard it through the grapevine and all those classics and everything. So you spent time at the Hall of Fame, kept hanging out there, meeting people, and then chance meetings, things happen. At some point you met Mike Stoller and Jerry Leiber.
Right, Jerry and Mike they kept showing up on the ballot, but the problem was they had actually written a couple of songs before 1955, and the way the ballots were divided up were in those days were there was a posthumous category pre-1955 and post-1955, and it was supposed to be dead people, and then people who wrote Tin Pan Alley type songs, and then people who wrote rock and roll songs, and others. And so they could never get elected because they were in the same category with all these classic Tin Pan Alley songwriters. So I said, this is ridiculous. They never had any big hits till after 55, so I just moved them over to the 55 and after category. And of course, they got elected on the very first ballot, and they were rather grateful for that. And they were huge heroes of mine going all the way back to childhood. We would, I don't know if you're going to remember this, there was a radio special about Elvis that went on for several weeks. And it was like, we would listen to it after church. It was running on Sunday afternoons, and two of the people that got interviewed were Jerry Leiber and Mike Stoller. And they talked about the songs they wrote for Elvis, but then the announcer says, but they didn't just write songs for Elvis Presley, they also wrote these hits, and it's flying through all the song titles that she read, and one of them was Charlie Brown, which was my favorite song as a small child, and I'm like, this guy's wrote Charlie Brown and Hound Dog, how can this be? And so they were just, like I say, I was like 11, 12 years old. They were heroes of mine going all the way back. And so to get to meet them was exciting enough. And then...
Not knowing that you were going to be running their publishing company one day.
That's right.
Just meeting, that's...
Well, what had happened was the Songwriters Hall of Fame's museum had lost its lease, and so we had moved temporarily into another building. And that same building, this is what coincidence is about. This is my entire life, by the way. There was a guy there named Sid Bernstein who was running a record label. And so I met Sid, and I said, Jeff, you got a publishing company? He said, no. And I said, oh, that's interesting. And so he came back to me later and said, tell me about this publishing thing. So I was the one that had to teach Sid Bernstein, the man who brought the Beatles to America, what music publishing was.
I was going to say, he had a little bit of connection with Muscle Shoals because of the rhythm section from here that went and opened up for the Beatles when they first played domestically and everything.
That is correct. And so I ended up getting asked to run first the publishing division and then jointly run the record label with Sid. We had a massive hit called In the Evening, big huge dance hit by Cheryl Lee Ralph. And I noticed the other day that she's now on the cover of AARP magazine, which kind of shows how old I am and how long I've been in the business. But we also had a Mayor the Musical, which Charles Strauss, same guy that wrote Annie, wrote a musical about Mayor Ed Koch. And
we just passed one of Koch, but is this...
That's Jerry Leiber. That's me.
Yeah.
And Mike Stoller. That's the night we met.
Really?
Yeah. 1981.
Wow.
Yep.
It was off to the races after that, right?
Well, I wanted a picture like the one with Elvis, and of course they stood the wrong way. It's supposed to be the other way around.
But I guess they had enough credibility that you let them slide on that one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So you're working with Sid Bernstein. You're in the new building and everything, and then
and we're things are going great, and then I discovered that our financier is probably not someone I should be in business with.
That never happens, does it?
No, especially in the music
business.
And as I'm thinking, oh, this is really, really, really bad, the phone rings and it's Mike Stoller. And Mike said, Jerry and I just lost our business partner. We're looking for somebody to help us run our company. Do you know anybody? And I said, you are talking to him. And he said, really? And I said, yeah, things are going south here quick. I'll be happy to meet with you. And so I met with he and Jerry at the Friars Club in New York, and that was it.
So, luck, smarts, goodness, grace, lots of those things played into your career, right?
Yeah, well, it's always been that way. It's like me and Sammy Kahn and Ed meeting with Ed Koch to try to find a home for the Songwriters Hall of Fame, to the point that I know him so well he becomes Ed.
The mayor of New York becomes Ed,
and we end up doing Mayor the Musical, and so yeah, it's my whole life.
Yeah. Well, what a career, what a journey. So, you want to talk about pictures? You want to what?
Well, that's just we had
Dean Miller there.
Yeah, we had not only the songs that Leiber and Stoller wrote in the publishing company. We owned 50,000 copyrights. And among the many that we owned were a lot of country songs, including Tall, Tall Trees, which Alan Jackson had a #1 hit with, and it was written by George Jones and Roger Miller, so that's me and Roger's son getting awards for Tall, Tall Trees, and that's, of course, Francis Preston on the right. Got any more? That's another country song of ours is called Blue, which that gentleman wrote, Bill Mack. Some of you might remember Bill, the Midnight Cowboy, one of the great DJs in the South. And that's Leanne and then me standing in the back just being goofy. And then this is sad. That's the last photo taken of us together before Jerry passed away.
What year would that have been?
2011. That was the revised version of the music publishing book, and it needs to be revised. That's when Leiber and Stoller were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They were inducted the same night as B.B. King, and as far as heroes go, there was none larger in my life, and so I was determined that I was going to meet this man while we're in the same room at the same time. And luckily Mina was with me with camera in hand, and
having a good-looking woman in tow never hurts, you know?
Yeah. And I just went up to him and I said, Mr. King, whoever told you they were your biggest fan was lying, because you're looking at him. And that's him laughing. But that was a great moment. And it led to, as the coincidences never end, he ended up writing the foreword to my second book, Squeeze My Lemon.
Cool.
You also named your son.
Oh, I left out something rather major. Some of you have, it's good to have the little crew down here. I should have had you sitting right here. It's also notable that my son's name is Riley Poe, named after Riley B. King, which is BB's real name. And there he is. Anybody else? Well, there's another one. That character, of course, is Billy Gibbons, and I met Billy. I heard Billy Bob Thornton in a documentary say it was like meeting a cartoon character, and I thought exactly the same thing. I just remember him. I was to meet him at this restaurant called Chibo's, and I remember him walking towards me, and I'm thinking, it's Yosemite Sam. But we became good pals, and he eventually wrote the foreword to SkyDog, the Duane Allman Story.
Yeah, I think, I don't see Wayne right now, but James, you and Wayne saw them here at the Coliseum in the mid-'70s or something, is that right? ZZ Top?
Yeah.
Something like that?
Was this when they wrote Tush?
Yes.
Wow.
That's the story. They wrote it at Counts Brothers, didn't they? Can you get some publishing out of that for us?
So the ZZ Top actually wrote the song Tush right here in was it Florence?
That's what
Florence Coliseum?
That's what we've been told.
I
Yeah.
think it was at the sound check.
At the sound check at the Coliseum.
Yeah, we were lined up to go in and you could hear them jamming on the lick in there.
Wow.
Chad.
They were at Norton Auditorium a few months before that.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Played at UNA before the Coliseum. There was maybe 300 people there.
That's the book. That the reason I keep talking about the coincidences, the kismet, the way this is inexplicable. When I was here in the 70s doing all of those interviews, everybody I interviewed, I said, do you have a Duane Allman story? And they all did. Rick certainly had a bunch. Jimmy Johnson had them. Pete Carr had 1 million. So I collected and kept all those tapes that were going to be the Muscle Shoals book. And I was at the NAMM convention, which is in Anaheim, California. It's music merchandisers. And I'm walking around looking from booth to booth, and there's a booth for Backbeat Guitar Player magazine. And I walked up to the booth, and there's 2 young men standing there, and I said, I wrote for Guitar Player magazine before you 2 were born. And I said, what's Backbeat Books? And they said, well, it used to be called Miller Freeman Books, but we changed the name to Backbeat because that sounds a lot hipper than Miller Freeman. And I said, well, I was looking on Amazon, and I saw that Miller Freeman was supposed to put out a book about the Allman Brothers, and it never came out. And they said, no, it's not going to happen. And then one of the guys said, well, we'd like to have a book about the Allman Brothers. And they're looking at me, and I'm holding a couple of other of my books in my hand, and I'm like, they're still around. There's no end to the story. How do you write the story and then they kept on going? So I said, there's not a book yet until there's an ending. And so I'm driving back from Anaheim to L.A. and I went, wait a minute. Duane Allman certainly had an ending. And so when I got back to the house, I went to Amazon and started looking for a book on Duane Allman. And there was 1 million on Eric Clapton and on Robert Johnson. And I did the top 10 Rolling Stone greatest guitarists, and every single one of them had books, multiple books about them, except Duane, who had none. So I wrote the guys and said, hey, I'll do a book on Duane Allman if you'd like. And things went from there, and I was able to use all those great interviews from the time he was in Muscle Shoals for that book. And so it paid off after all.
Terry Richardson standing over there, we've talked about this recently. When Gladriella Allman came here and had her book signing, Terry and Tommy Talton and Scott Boyer played Please Be With Me at 3614 Jackson Highway, and that was a pretty special moment and everything.
Yeah. And they're no longer with us.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Gladriella read from an excerpt that she had from her dad's journal that she was conceived in Muscle Shoals.
How about that? And I'll tell you about, yeah, applause for that. So she's a wonderful person. When I started working on the book, I thought, it'd be great for this to be authorized. And so I wrote to her and told her who I was and what I wanted to do. And she wrote back and she said, I'm actually going to write a book about my father, so I can't be involved with yours, but there were many sides to him, so please be my guest, do it. And so I did, and she did what she said she was going to say. I just thought that was fascinating. These 2 people said they're going to sit down and write a book about Duane Allman, and they both did. But I also thought that it was very sweet of her to be so open about it.
To be supportive.
And there she is. Mina and I were at an event at the Skirball Center for Bill Graham, and we're walking down the hall, and she looked at me and I looked at her, And I said, Galadriel? And she said, Randy? Because we'd only seen pictures of each other. And but she was great. She's a wonderful person.
Yeah. How cool is that? One of the great books. I guess the great thing about the SkyDog thing is that you talk to so many people here that knew him, so it's got such a Muscle Shoals flair to it and everything.
Yeah, and the other reason I think that there hadn't been a book about him until mine was that people, how do you write a book about this guy that it's always hard when they die so young, but also unless you knew this area and these people and knew who to interview down here and the ones that were still alive, then how do you write a book about them?
Yeah, and some of his greatest recordings came right down the street at Fame.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We could throw a rock to there maybe on a windy day.
Well, that's me with hair, with Percy Sledge, David Johnson. I told David, I said, I sure would like to interview Percy. And he said, Percy will be here or not. I said, what do you
sounds
mean?
like some of the shows y'all played, didn't it, James? Percy will be here or not.
I said, what do you mean? He says, if somebody asks him, bumps into him and says, hey, let's go to Florida, he'll do that instead. But he said if he's not interrupted, he'll be there. And sure enough, he was there, and he was
at Broadway, or where was this
This is
at?
at Broadway. That's a Broadway Sound. And that's the old sofa at Broadway Sound. And so I talked to him about all the stuff, Quinn Ivy and Marlon Green, and how the recording came to be. And he was just a sweetheart. Now, boy, I wonder if I have time to tell this. Very quickly, many years later, decades later, Jimmy Johnson calls me. He's in L.A. He wants me to come meet him at a casino, at a club casino, card casino in South Central. And I'm like, what? It's not where you go. And he said, yeah, Percy's playing at this card casino. So okay, how could I turn this down? So I drive into this, the most dangerous part of Los Angeles. I have a valet takes my car, and I'm thinking I'll probably never see it again. And I go in, and the smoke is from here to the ceiling, and it's all people playing cards. And then in the back through the haze, I see this ticket booth kind of thing, and I walk up to it, and I said, hi, I'm here for the Percy Sledge show, and then I said, oh, right this way, and I said, I'm meeting Jimmy Johnson. So we go in, and it's like this tiny version of a Vegas theater, and the stage that is the curtain is a waterfall. It's actual water coming from the ceiling to the floor. And the opening act is, ladies and gentlemen, here he is, Eddie Cochran's cousin. And so Eddie Cochran's cousin and band perform doing, Come On, Let's Go, and 20 Flight Rock, and all of Eddie's hits. And then as they finishing their last song, the water starts coming back down again, and they disappear behind the curtain of water. And like 5 minutes goes by, and they're, ladies and gentlemen, our main attraction, Percy Sledge. The water stops. There's Percy. There's Eddie Cochran and his band. So it was like 1968-ish for an hour, because Percy did Percy's hits. He had his tribute to Sam Cooke. He had his tribute to Otis Redding. Nothing happened after 1968 on that stage. But the beautiful thing that night for me was Jimmy sitting next to me. And every time Percy would start to sing a song, Jimmy would say, oh, I remember that night. And it hit me. Oh, my God. He was either the engineer or playing guitar on every one of those records. But so afterwards we went back stage, and there's a line of about 25 women in front of us. and we had a long time to talk while we were waiting for all these women to go in and say hi to Percy. And finally, we're at the back of the line, and we go in, and Percy saw us, and he burst out crying. And hugged Jimmy, and it was just like, and he pointed at me, he says, "I know you too," and it's like, it's okay. But Jimmy told me, he said, every year at the Alabama Music Hall of Fame, or every other year, I guess, he said, Percy would always sing "When a Man Loves a Woman," and we always tried to do it a half step lower, because so that he'd be able to hit the notes, and he'd always catch us and say, "No, do it in the right key."
For those that don't know, Jimmy Johnson was the engineer on When a Man Loves a Woman, also engineered like Wild Horses and Brown Sugar. I mean, he could have quit just with those three songs, engineering, but went on to have such a career. But Percy Sledge, on my tours all the time, I tell people that, When a Man Loves a Woman is the national anthem of Muscle Shoals.
Absolutely.
It'd be hard to get better than that. You know this guy?
Yeah, I met him. That's of course Rodney, and he's a sweetheart. And I put that in there because I wanted to have something from Fame. And back when I was interviewing Rick in the olden days, we didn't have cell phones and a camera at our instant disposal. So, but I love the saying. It's gone. But through these doors walk the finest musicians, songwriters, artists, and producers in the world, and it's so true.
I saw a picture of
Donnie.
Chris. I think I took that picture of you guys.
Johnny took that picture. I was so excited to see Donnie Fritz at the Flobama one night while I was in town, and I am not shy. And I went over and I'm introducing myself to him. I'm like, he hadn't seen me in 40 years, and I'm like, I'm Randy Poe, president of Leiber and Stoller Music Publishing, and used to be executive director of the Songwriters Hall of Fame. Nothing's registering. He's just looking at me, and I said, I wrote a book called SkyDog, the Duane Allman Story, and he goes, "Oh, I believe I would have led with that." He was the greatest.
His wife Donna said Donnie is the best apologizer I've ever met in my life. He could cut you to the bone sometimes. Most everybody in here has had one of those experiences with him.
Let's forget. Oh, this is one of my proudest achievements, and also how I got to use so many of those interviews that I had done. The folks at Rhino Records were based in California, and I was based in New York. I was like, I have so many ideas for Rhino Records, and I'm on the wrong coast. And one day, Leiber and Stoller announced to me that they wanted to move to the West Coast, and this meant uprooting my wife from her job as the art director of Carnegie Hall. But she took it well, and we moved to L.A., and very shortly after we moved there, somebody from Rhino contacted me about wanting what in the publishing business is called a reduced rate, which means they don't want to pay the full rate that they're supposed to pay to use a song on a record. And I said, I've been waiting for this phone call for several years. I'm coming over to meet you folks. And I went over there with two ideas, eventually three, but the first two were to do like a Leiber and Stoller rock and roll album, because they wrote a lot of stuff besides rock and roll, but this is basically, it's called There's a Riot Going On, the rock and roll classics of Leiber and Stoller. And I said, and I'll get interviews with Leiber and Stoller, it'll be a great package, but you have to let me do one about Muscle Shoals. And so they said, oh, okay, we've heard of that. And so I did the Muscle Shoals Sound CD immediately after the Leiber and Stoller CD. And it got rave reviews and all that stuff, but I was mainly just proud to be able to make it happen, because
the first time all the Muscle Shoals songs had really been on a unit together as one.
Yeah.
I wore a groove in that.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. But that was it. I thought, I'd like folks in my hometown to like me, and this just might help.
I know we've covered a lot of ground. We still got a lot to go, but one of the things, and we're kind of jumping around, but just because for aspiring songwriters or songwriters and publisher, tell them what you told me about Stand By Me. That song still has legs today. Just...
Okay. Everybody knows the song, and they think they've known it all their lives, but most people just know it because of that movie.
Which was 36 years ago this week, I think.
86, 87.
Yeah, something.
So the movie was coming out, and I worked out a deal where they didn't want to pay an absolute fortune to use the song in the movie, but I didn't want to blow this thing, because if Rob Reiner's putting out a movie called Stand By Me, you really don't want to, price him out of the ballpark and have him call it something else. And so I said, okay, just promise me that there's going to be a soundtrack album, and the song's going to be on the soundtrack album. And if there's going to be a single, it's going to be a single. But knowing they would never do that, because
Did you have more publishing on the album as well, or just that?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and also throw something else in there, please. Try to make me happy. And so they also managed to squeeze in Yakety Yak. And so the movie comes out, but just as the movie's coming out in the United States, you remember this is the 80s, and so the movies that were released here back then, like 6 weeks later, they'd finally come out in Europe. As opposed to now when it's simultaneous. And so right when the movie was coming out here, in the UK, there was a commercial for Levi jeans using Stand By Me. I did that deal too. But what I didn't know was that sometimes a commercial can get so popular in England that they will actually put the record out. And it happened with Jackie Wilson, it happened with a couple of others, and then they put out the Benny King recording of Stand By Me, and it started going up the charts in the UK. And then the Levi jeans commercial starts spreading across the continent. And it's in Germany, and it's in Spain, and Stand By Me is starting to get released in all these other European countries. And then the movie comes out, and the film company decides to put out Stand By Me, the original Benny King record, in the U.S. And it started going up the charts here. And so it ended up, it was number one all over the world, except here it made it to number 9, which is pretty good for a record that was, 30-something years old. And I guess you were talking about the financial part?
Yeah, but did the Mickey Gilley thing go number 1?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Stand By Me's been number 1 multiple times. I just mean this Benny King version this second time around. But I think the part that sparked Johnny's interest was I told him in that year, which was 87, the song grossed $1 million, over $1 million. And it's now 2025, and we've never had a year that it didn't continue to gross over $1 million a year. So if you want to have one copyright, that would be the one. Okay.
Can I read something real quick?
Yeah.
Alongside the invaluable wisdom and the profound observations of a man who's been deep inside the music industry, Poe tells a hilarious saga of chasing American icon Willie Nelson across Canada via plane, taxi, rental car, and even ferry boat, in a half-crazed attempt to pitch a single song to a country music legend. If you want to learn how to become a professional song plugger, if you want to discover the inner workings of the music business, if you're a Willie Nelson fan, or if you just want to read the funniest, hippest, long-titled music book of the century, Stalking the Red-Headed Stranger is for you. So tell us a little bit, because that's just such a great story.
So here's what happened. In 1983, Willie Nelson received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Songwriters Hall of Fame because he had done the Stardust album and it had recorded all these songs that so many songwriters who were in the Hall of Fame and on the board, etc., had written. And so we brought him to New York and presented him with this award. And I had my picture taken with him, and I was a child. I was 20-something, and he was 49. And then a few years later, many years later, 1998, my friend Roger Dietz was on the bus with Willie and said, "Hey, can you autograph a photo to my friend Randy?" So he autographs to Randy Poe. "Thanks, Willie Nelson." And then I'm at Ray Charles' 70th birthday party, and I'm in the green room, and there's Willie, and we start talking, and the guy takes a picture of us together. So now in my office in Los Angeles, hanging side by side, me and Willie in 1983, to Randy Poe, "Thanks, Willie Nelson," and me and Willie like year 2000. And now I'm sitting at Jerry Leiber's house one day, and he says, they have one song which Frank Sinatra had recorded called "The Girls I Never Kissed," and he says, "I want you to take the Sinatra song to your buddy."
It's all about who you know.
Yeah, and I said, which buddy is that? He says, your what's his name? Your buddy Willie. And I'm like, I have a buddy named Willie? And I'm like, but, it's Leiber. And so I said, all right, I'd be glad to. And he said, he did that. He did that album of standards. And I'm like, oh, Willie Nelson. And I said, yeah. He says, but, don't just mail it to him or don't email it to him. Go play it for him in person. It's like, oh, yeah, because he's my buddy, so I would know exactly where he is.
He knows you about as well as all the rest of the Americans, right?
Yeah. So, yeah. so I go back to the office and promptly forget about it. And a couple of weeks goes by, and Mike Stoller calls me and says, "Boy, you have pissed off Leiber again." And I said, "What did I do this time?" He says, "You're supposed to take that song to Willie Nelson, and you didn't do it." I said, "He was serious?" He said, "Yeah." He says, "I don't care what you have to do. Get the song to Willie." And I'm like, okay. So the only person I know, and once again, it's just the giant coincidence that never ends, is a guy named John McEwen from the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. And so I had once had lunch with John, and John had told me a story about Willie that made me realize they know each other well. And so I thought, okay, I'll find John. And so I go to John's website, and he's not in the area. He's not answering his phone. He's got no gigs listed. I go to the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band's website, and they're in Canada. I'm like, oh, okay. So I go to Willie Nelson's website, and he's in Canada. So I go back to the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band site, and I realize one's opening for the other, and I'm guessing the Dirt Band's opening for Willie in Canada. So I emailed John, and I'm like, I can't reach you by phone, but I need to pitch a tune to Willie. And he wrote back, "Come on up. We're bored out of our minds. It's Canada." And so yeah, so that's I flew on a plane and chased him across Canada all the way to Newfoundland, which, by the way, it's a half-hour time zone difference between the East Coast and Newfoundland, and and actually captured him first of all on the ferry boat, because Mickey Raphael and I had become friends going all the way back to the Songwriters Hall of Fame days. And so Mickey said, as Willie's walking by on the boat, he says, "Oh, you got to hear this song." And Willie said, "Hey, bring it to the bus when we get to town." So we landed. I got a rental car, drove to the next town where they were playing.
Without maps or GPS.
No. I had a guy, Canadians, at least they're friendly. Because I got this rental car from the guy named Gene, because he's the only guy that has rental cars in Newfoundland. And I said, "Just one problem. I don't know how to get to Corner Brook." And this other person standing there said, "I'm going that way, just follow me."
Felt like you were in Muscle Shoals, didn't it?
Yeah. So there's a guy in a truck, and so I just followed the truck until I look up ahead of me, and there's the bus. And I'm like, okay, I'm good. And just followed the bus on into this town, which has hockey rink. It was hockey rinks all the way across Canada.
That was where they were playing was hockey rinks?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's Randy and Willie on the bus. And
You don't look incriminating in that photo.
There's another one that's pretty incriminating.
Yeah.
Oh, was it that one? Yeah. That got on the internet about the same time I got the photos from the from the guys who printed the photos, so they kind of beat me to it. But yeah, that's the first photo of Willie smoking pot to make the internet. But yeah,
You just happen to be an innocent bystander, right?
I have no. I think I admitted it in the book that.
You did.
Yeah, and everything you've heard is true.
Randy said it took all of his energy just to get up but Willie was acting like he did it every day, which he did, right?
I think it's because he did it every day. Yeah.
For like James out jogging every day, was used to it, but for you hanging out with Willie. But anyway, you finally got to him and pitched the song, which I think he did not record. But what a week long.
I think I never thought the song was right for him, but if he's doing nothing but Sinatra these days, so if
maybe it's time to do it again.
It might be time.
Yeah. So we're going to have to wind up here in a little bit. What you want to look at pictures? You want to take questions? What?
We can move on from this one.
Okay.
It's a bad influence on my child.
And don't look at that one, Riley. Okay.
And this was the most recent was Buckham, which was the family wanted me to write the book after the success of SkyDog, and I wanted to do it. And while I was meeting with them in Bakersfield, they took me into Buck's old office, and there was a big, huge stack of cassettes, and Buck's nephew said, "Oh, hey, those could be helpful." And I said, what are those? And he said, "Well, Buck, like the last 5 years of his life, he just recorded his whole life story on cassette tapes." I said, that can help. And so it went from being the authorized biography to the autobiography in one afternoon. And it was like putting together the most complicated jigsaw puzzle in the world, because the very first tape was some story about hee-haw, and tape 17 was where he was born. So it was there was a lot of putting it together, but it was a lot of fun. And
Sounds like the way I've drug you around today, from pillar to post, so to speak, and everything. What about this young man?
Oh, Michael. Some of you, if you've ever heard people say, "Yeah, he doesn't really talk in that high voice," it's true. Michael was all the time I spent with him was a normal person who talked like a normal person. I don't know what all the affectations were about, but he was a guy who knew R&B music like nobody I ever knew. He could sit there and talk to me about Roy Brown and Wynonie Harris and these guys that did jump blues songs in 1953, and it's like he just and I realized as I'm talking to him, well, of course he would know this stuff. This is what his father, ingrained in these kids. Yeah. But Michael wanted to buy two companies of ours called Trio and Quartet. We ended up selling them to a company called Windswept Pacific, and then when Mike and Jerry decided to sell 98 of their own songs, Michael said, "All right, we're doing it this time," and we did. So we sold them to Sony ATV. Michael owned ATV and had merged it with Sony, and we had one of the real cool things about the agreement was we had a side letter with Michael that once the deal was done and everybody had time, that Michael would sit down with Mike and Jerry, and the three of them would write a song together. And the ink wasn't dry before Michael passed away. So that was,
wow.
Yeah, it was a shame. It would have been fun.
Man, that would have been iconic's not even a word for that. Wow.
And that's just a couple of years ago. I know he's ancient, but he still functions like nobody you've ever seen. Mike Stoller, this was a really proud achievement for me. Michael Gray came to me a decade ago and said, I would love to have Mike Stoller do a Poets and Prophets at the Country Music Hall of Fame. I said, how many rock and roll guys have you had? And he said, none. And I said, then I'm going to make it happen. Lots of things got in the way, including COVID. And then when finally everybody could all find a date, we did it in December, just a couple of years back, so when Mike was a mere 90.
Wow.
Okay. You went, oh, and yeah, that's my band. Every
You look like a bass player.
yeah, we've there's a group of guys in LA that got together every Tuesday night for 15 years before COVID to hang out and talk about stuff, all music business guys. And then when COVID hit, we had to do it via Zoom. But one night I'm sitting at the old men dinner, and Pete Thomas, who's the drummer for Elvis Costello, is whispering to Harvey Shield, who's the lead vocalist for the Mighty Echoes, and they're looking at me. And I said, are you guys talking about me? And Pete says, we think you look like a bass player. And I said, I have a bass. So I became the bass player in the Old Man Dinner Band, and that is our EP, which was done merely as a frolic, and so I could tell my grandkids that I was once in a band with the guy in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
The first track on it is Arthur Alexander, You Better Move On.
Yeah, when we of course had to do a tribute to the homeland, so we opened with You Better Move On.
All right, you want to take some questions?
Yes. Oh,
well, let's...
and then there's that David Anderson right there. I you guys, I thank you profusely. Who am I leaving out? David. Who else? Sandra. For having me be a part of that thing. I'm very proud to have my name on the plaque right there next to Terry Woodford.
And Bill Matthews. Can't leave Bill out. He was a driving force behind
Absolutely
making all that happen and everything.
Okay, any questions?
Don't be shy.
Did you interview Duane?
No, Duane was. I'm old, but I'm not that old. No, Duane passed away in '71, and I was like in sophomore in high school. I was also living in Missouri at that time. But so the Allman Brothers with Duane, I never actually saw them perform in a concert in person. But I saw in '74. I saw them right when Ramblin' Man was a hit.
Billy Lawson.
Explain to Johnny Otis and Leiber and Stoller deal over Hound Dog.
Okay, we'll do that real quick. Johnny Otis was a guy in L.A. who worked with a lot of different record labels. One of them was Peacock Records out of Houston, Texas, a guy named Don Roby. And Johnny called Mike and Jerry and said, I need you to come see this act that I'm rehearsing and write a song for. And so they go to Johnny's garage, which is where he and his band always practice, and they met Big Mama Thornton. And she sang a song for him, and they realized, all right, this is a heavy-duty blues singer. And so they went out to Jerry's car or Mike's car, but one of them had a car, and they came up with Hound Dog. Wrote it down, went back in, and played it for her. Jerry sang it, and Mike played piano, and Big Mama said, please don't try to tell me how to sing. And so she, the very next day, they went into the studio, and Johnny had been playing drums in the rehearsal, And so when they got in the studio, it was the drummer that was part of Johnny's band, and Mike and Jerry had Johnny sit in and play the drums. So that's his great drum lick on the original Big Mama Thornton version. And I think what you're talking about is, and then when the record came out on Peacock, it said Leiber, Stoller, Otis as the writers, and so they had to work kind of hard to get Johnny's name extracted, but things were even worse in reality, because John Roby, who owned Peacock Records, had already registered the copyright as the song having been written by him and Big Mama Thornton, and so there ended up being 3 separate copyrights on the same song, those two, and the one that properly just said Leiber and Stoller, and so there were of course the obligatory lawsuits. That Mike and Jerry had the advantage in that they were underage. And then, of course, Don Roby didn't pay them at all, and so they ended up having to sue Don Roby, and so Don had to come to L.A. to court, and the judge said that Don Roby had to write them a check for $2,000, and he sat there and wrote them a check and handed it to them in front of the judge, flew back to Houston, and immediately stopped the check. so anybody that thinks Leiber and Stoller got rich off of the original version of Hound Dog, they got nothing. But things worked out later when that other guy recorded it.
Explain to them who Johnny Otis is.
Well, yeah, Johnny was his biggest hit as an artist was a thing called Willie and the Hand Jive. And so he was not a man without talent. He was not only somebody who could put together who could write songs and put together acts. He discovered the Lester and the Jimmy Witherspoon and Big Mama Thornton. He had quite
Etta James.
Oh yeah, and Etta James. So he had quite a roster of people that he was responsible for discovering. Johnny was a Greek guy, and Billy Vera called me one day and said the Rhythm and Blues Foundation every year used Billy Vera's band, Billy and the Beaters, and he called me up and he says, "I just got off the phone with Johnny Otis." I said, "Yeah." He said, Johnny said he doesn't think the Rhythm and Blues Foundation should use my band anymore because we're white. And he said, he says, I was like apologizing to the guy and feeling really bad, and I hung up and went, he's Greek. He's as white as I am. So,
Matt, what you got?
Julia mentioned that you were in New Orleans or Louisiana.
well, that was as a child, small child. Yes, we went from here when I was 3 months old from Fayette, where I was born, in that mansion I was telling you about.
Exactly. The gated estate.
Yes, and so that's for my father. That's where he went to the seminary, and so I was only there as a wee lad. But just the point was just to show that I hung out in the South an awful lot, from birth onward as much as possible.
All right. Anybody else? James Counts, Julia, Libby, Niles, Terry, everybody involved. I'm probably missing somebody. Thank y'all so much for coming. Randy Poe, what an honor. This guy, a lot of times you sit down with more people on the music, the band side. You're behind the scenes, so to speak. But you're the guy that collects the money. Everybody likes you because, how many times, Ronnie Eads is back there. How many times have you showed up? Wayne Chaney told me one of my favorite stories one time. The club wasn't going to pay him, so next thing you know, they're like taking pots and pans and all the stuff out of the kitchen, and the club owner's like, "What are you doing?" He said, "We're getting our money." I mean, whatever you got to do. But anyway, thank y'all for coming. Thank you, Randy Poe.
Thank you.